Good morning, Keith. Thank you so much for hopping on here and having this conversation with me. The topic of today's conversation will be technical to enterprise risk perspective. We'll do some brief introductions. My name is Marco Punzo. I'm the lead sales executive here at Sennovate. I would love for you to give your introduction.
Sure. I'm Keith Duemling, Senior Director of Cybersecurity Technology Protection here at the Cleveland Clinic. I've been in healthcare for almost 20 years, based out of the Cleveland, Ohio area. So great to be here and looking forward to the topic.
Fantastic. No, that's great. So we can get right into, this first question and we'll take it from there, Keith. Can you explain the transition from the technical side of cybersecurity to the enterprise risk perspective? And then why is this shift important in today's digital landscape?
I think that's a great question, especially to start us off on this topic. Cybersecurity has evolved, especially in healthcare, over the last 20 plus years, having seen a lot. It's emerged less as a technical focused discipline, and it's now become a business discipline, part of risk management. So, pivoting that conversation away from being solely focused on technology into the larger business ecosystem is really essential for the topic to resonate with the stakeholders and to build solutions that are scalable for the entire business and allow us to be part of the conversation in all aspects of the business.
Of course, no, thank you so much for that response. I definitely seen on my side of the spectrum how cybersecurity has developed and how more and more companies look at it as a business risk aspect. So that is fantastic. Going to the second question here, what practical tips or strategies can cybersecurity professionals use to make complex technical concepts accessible to non-technical decision makers?
Yeah, I think that's something that we've struggled with throughout the years, to be perfectly honest. I like to say that, and I think the industry said, there's an influx of people going to get their MBA. And, while that knowledge is important, I think one of the key aspects, especially since I have an MBA, is that forced me to start to talk to the business, start to think about the challenges in the language of the business and what the business is trying to do. I think that is a key part of taking complex technical items and translating it into what is going to resonate, in our case, with the clinicians who are treating patients, working on research and things of that nature, and really help us to speak their language and understand what their needs are so that we can then work with them and collaborate with them to solve their problems. So they're not just working on cyber and technical problems, but we're addressing their clinical and business needs at the same time. And I think that type of mindset shift is what is started in an MBA program or whatever leadership program you take on. But that, whatever the trigger is, that spark, that event is essential, in my opinion, to elevate the conversation and to emerge as a cybersecurity executive as part of a larger business.
Of course, no, definitely. Having those conversations, it's easy to gear those technical conversations to a non-technical person. So you have to understand the underlying business effect of whatever solution, whatever cybersecurity need that they have, and how does it affect the business. So I completely agree with that. Going into this third question here, can you share real-world examples of incidents where a lack of communication between technical experts and business leaders led to a cybersecurity vulnerability?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple examples that kind of come to mind. I won't go into the specific details, but I think we've all had those scenarios where the clinical and the business areas drive forward an initiative, and either because of challenges with engagement, challenges with the message resonating properly, we've seen capabilities and initiatives go forward that are lacking some of the cyber controls that are necessary to keep them secure and safe from the beginning, and it causes a fair amount of rework to occur. I've seen that, like I said, with applications that have and products that have gone to market, but I've also seen that with internal capabilities that are stood up to provide expanded care throughout the years where, without that forethought, there's risk that then, the service has to be taken offline. It has to be retrofitted with the security. It causes a lot of rework, unnecessary expenses and interruption that, are just something that the business can't tolerate. And certainly the clinicians and the patients, it's a pretty significant inconvenience to them. And it's also a pretty significant risk. So it's those type of situations where we're not communicating well collectively that can cause things that, best case scenario require rework. Worst case scenario, put the business, at a risk that then comes to be realized. And we've seen in the news, no shortage of situations where something has been taken advantage of, and it's either interrupted service or damaged the reputation or the revenue stream of organizations, healthcare, and even outside of healthcare.
100%. Looking at it from a different perspective there, from the business use case, it's always return on investment, right? What is this going to do for the business? How is it going to help the business? But on the ground level, it's user, experience. How is this solution, how is this application helping my day-to-day lives? And obviously, what you exactly just said there, if there's not communication, it's going to affect both of them. And depending on how bad the miscommunication is, you'll see the extent of the damage that can be done. So that's fantastic. Going into this next question here, kind of going from the real world examples, what strategies and best practices do you recommend for translating, technical cybersecurity insights into the language of enterprise risk?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that looking back in my career, these efforts have always been successful when, at the very beginning, there's an appreciation for open communication and there's partnership. So functions like business relationship managers, joint governance committees, articulation of a need in the format of a business case, getting key stakeholders to be part of initiatives at the earliest phase, inception, design, development, and then go to market. Those are all steps that I would recommend organizations take advantage of, whether it's something small or something large, because effectively you're working to keep that relationship and that input something that's consistent and constant throughout the entire process. Not just at the end stage when you're about to bring something to market. That's when you ask the people who probably need to use it, hey, what do you think of this? You really need to be getting their input at the earliest possible point and working jointly to solve problems. I think we've seen a lot of products that have revolutionized, the consumer electronics, where it's because of the customer's voice being thought of throughout the entire process that what comes to market is something really strong, as opposed to a company thinking they know what the customer wants and delivering it to them. And I think if you take that same type of thought process, design thinking, and apply it to cyber initiatives, you are going to have a much greater chance of success and a much greater chance of reducing risk that potentially would be introduced if it had not been identified and solved earlier in the process.
No, of course. I've definitely seen that on my side of the spectrum in regards to, getting that engagement from all the stakeholders, right? You want that engagement from the beginning so that you can develop that solution and or need specifically for them. So I completely agree, getting those stakeholders in there as early as possible, really, focusing on the user experience and how it actually will help them. That is fantastic. Going into this next question here, can you provide examples of industries or sectors where this transition from the technical to the enterprise risk perspective is especially critical?
Well, I can't think of an industry where it's not critical, to be perfectly honest. I mean, we've seen, if you look at the trade regs, we've seen a number of different industries that have experienced issues such as, threat actors entering their environment, interruption from ransomware, nation states that have targeted them for, whatever reason. So really it's something that I think every industry has to grapple with, and needs to understand. Now, there's different motivating reasons for it. Obviously, from a financial standpoint, there's the financial impact. When we look at research and development, there is intellectual property security. On the federal space, there's obviously protecting the federal infrastructure and people. And from a healthcare standpoint, it's protecting the ability to provide care to people, and actually patient safety, since IT systems are embedded so much in clinical operations. So it's really not should the industries consider this critical. It's they need to understand why it's critical and how you integrate this type of open communication throughout the entire process. So again, you're not just talking about it when you think there's a threat or when something has happened. You're keeping those communication channels open, throughout the entire process. It almost becomes second nature.
Of course, no, definitely. Looking at all the industries as a whole, I believe, like you just said, there are specific points that resonate with each of those industries. And I think the toughest conversation that I have with specific, key stakeholders in those specific companies, in those industries, is, this is why you need to have this now. This is what we've seen in the industry, specifically yours, over the past couple of years, and this is why you need X, Y, Z solution, and this is why you need to start having these conversations now instead of having the conversations after it already happened. Because after the attack already happened, it's kind of already too late, right? You have to start playing catch up.
At that point, you're in a response mode.
Mm-hmm.
Versus if you're having those conversations in real time, you can definitely be in a prevent mode. So
exactly.
you can, I like to think that cybersecurity has two ultimate goals, reducing risk and creating value. And if you're able to have those conversations earlier in the process, you're able to do both of those. If you're having those conversations very close to the event or after the event, at most, you're going to be reducing the risk or reducing the blast radius. You are not going to be reducing the potential for it because it's already happened, and you're certainly not going to be creating value to the organization because the disruption has already occurred.
I completely agree. No, that's great insight there, Keith. Going into this next question here, can you discuss the role of emerging technologies such as AI and automation in improving cybersecurity communication and risk management?
Yeah, I think there's not a conversation these days that doesn't have AI brought up at some point, generative AI, whatever you want to call it. I think that we're on the cusp of a revolution when it comes to what AI can do for us. We're seeing it penetrate the consumer market. We are seeing it moving into the enterprise. We're seeing it within healthcare, obviously, and we're seeing it within cybersecurity. I think it provides a very unique opportunity to drive up automation, to drive up the effectiveness of our cyber controls, to provide some contextual information that is not possible without looking at some of the big picture. And I think it offers cybersecurity professionals an opportunity to take those, I won't say mundane, but those constant and high volume activities, move them into a platform that is very AI driven and frees them up to be able to take the output from the AI system, and work with the business stakeholders and do a deeper level of understanding. So I don't think it's going to replace people by any means. I think it's going to free them up to do the things that we have been bogged down for so many years doing, which is trying to look through the millions of events per day or the countless CVEs that are released and trying to understand if they're in our environment. And it's going to simplify that process and allow us to do what we do best, which is analyze complex things and come up with novel solutions and socialize those solutions to the business. So that's how I see AI revolutionizing cybersecurity going forward. From an enablement standpoint, obviously AI, quantum, and a number of other initiatives are going to push the boundaries of what cyber has to do and evolve, because there's going to be new risks associated with those things. So it's going to force us to evolve our thought process, our controls, and other things like that. So it is a revolution in a good way, and a challenging way at the same time.
No, definitely. I actually love what you just said there in regards to, AI being used as more of a tool instead of as competition with the human factor of IT teams. I've been on countless calls and having countless conversations with IT teams that are just overwhelmed. I don't think there's anybody out there that feels that they have enough hands, around to help and make sure that everything's fully secure. So utilizing an AI or anything that deals with automation to get those mundane tasks out of the way, so you can fully focus on the key initiatives, is something that will always help. And I truly believe that AI will be used more as a tool instead of the fear of replacing the workforce.
Yeah, there's ingenuity, creativity that doesn't exist right now in AI platforms, that only exists in people, and cannot be replaced, and shouldn't be marginalized as a means to take full advantage of AI systems. We at the Cleveland Clinic, we're lucky enough to have an organization that supports our initiatives and sees a lot of value in what we bring. And our objective is not to bring in AI to reduce our footprint from a personnel standpoint. It's to unlock and enable that talent that is there, and it's kind of sometimes held down because of the voluminous work, and really let them kind of push the boundary of what their creativity is when it comes to finding cyber threats that could come to become a reality in our organization, building those relationships and creating novel things. So we see it as helping us when it comes to the labor challenges we have, by giving back time to the most valuable asset that we have, which is our people.
Exactly. No, that's one thing that we can't get enough of, is time, and getting as much back as possible will help, further develop the whatever space that you're in, which I completely agree. Moving forward into this next question here, how can organizations create a collaborative environment that encourages cybersecurity experts and business leaders to work together to effectively manage their enterprise risks?
So I think I touched on this a little bit earlier. There's a number of structural opportunities that I think businesses can take advantage of. They need to have business relationship managers, business information security officers, BISOs, instead of just CISOs, to really create those interface points with the organization. They need to be part of procurement, part of solution design for organizations. I think beyond that, it's important for cybersecurity to also be part of the innovation efforts within an organization, so that when an organization is starting to develop a new line of service, a new capability, cyber is there with IT and the other stakeholder groups, and really is contributing to those things. And when you show the value to the business and the stakeholders, you show that you care, you show that you are dedicated to their success, they're going to see you more as a partner and less as an obstacle. And I think that's how the message will resonate and come to provide greater good to the business. If you look at it like a quality standpoint, in the early days of ISO and some of the other quality initiatives, it was seen as a roadblock. But then there's a turning point where organizations see, okay, quality means better customer adoption. It means less waste. It means better outcomes, and it's also ethically and morally something that is an imperative, especially in certain industries like healthcare. So we want to create an organization where there's 78,000 people dedicated to quality and patient safety, and ideally there's 78,000 people who are dedicated to cybersecurity in some capacity, so that it becomes part of the corporate culture, and then it's not something that relies solely on these interfaces like the BRM and BRM roles and a couple of these other things. It becomes innate to the business. That's just my theories.
Of course, no, and I love that insight there. Looking at it from any other's perspective in regards to, the relationship there, it's always an obstacle, viewing cybersecurity solutions providers, anything like that. It's like, oh, it's an obstacle that I have to get over, or they want my business in some way or shape. But if we start looking at it as a partnership and better developing, the business use cases within the company and how we can bring that value, I believe that's when, we'll really see those relationships emerge and grow for the future.
Yeah, agree completely.
Love that. Going into this next question here, more on the technical side, from a technical standpoint, what are the most common cybersecurity vulnerabilities organizations should be aware of that, can lead to enterprise level risks?
Oh, that's a tough one. I equate this, these are the what keeps me up at night type of question. Obviously from a technical standpoint, ransomware is something that is prevalent in the environment, and and by environment I just mean throughout the IT landscape, and it's something that we're going to have to continue to combat. I think the amount of research that is being put into finding zero-day vulnerabilities in products and responsible disclosure, there have been in the last 6 months several hundred really significant 0 days that require organizations to move fast to address them. So the cyber and network hygiene is one of those areas that I think keeps me up at night. And then another one is third-party risk management. We live in a world where we're dependent on so many third and fourth-party entities to provide critical services to us, but our boundaries often stop with our walls or virtual walls, and there's key functions that exist, or key access that exists, where those third parties and those fourth parties play a big picture. So we've got to find a way to streamline and drive forward that. And I would say the third area is probably the uncertainty when it comes to regulation is another area, just because we see Europe, the United States, at the state level, and other nations, they're all working to tackle these challenges, but they're not often working together. So for a large national business, it creates a lot of challenges to figure out, what's that solution that is compliant, or what are the expectations, whether it's disclosure or protection, that allows you to safely operate in so many places. So, again, keeping us safe from those emerging threats, the third-party risk, and then, the changing, regulatory landscape. Those are, I guess, the three things that keep me up at night.
Of course, no, and those are great insights there. You see everywhere the hot button topic is ransomware this, ransomware that, and then on top of that, you see how many companies are affected and are at risk for a third party attack. In regards to, you see it all over the internet or on the news, where a company gets hit and it has a chain reaction for whatever company uses that third party service. So I love your insight there, and it's definitely something that resonates with a lot of the people out there. Going into this next question here, in the event of a cybersecurity incident, what communication, what collaboration, what strategies are essential to minimize damage both technically and at the enterprise risk level?
That is a great question. And I think that for every organization, it's going to be a different strategy. I would say, obviously, there's the technical piece, which is try and avoid ever getting into that situation. But the reality is most organizations will experience some type of event. So, tabletopping, creating simulations of events so that you can practice what your response is going to look like, and have those simulations evolve with the changing business, the threat landscape, the areas of operations. And I think also including communication in that process is essential, because I've seen a number of organizations that their response from a technical standpoint is very strong, but while that's happening, the business, the patients or customers are not aware of the activities, and it can cause discomfort, uncertainty. So I think that is something that we often overlook. Is there's the technical response to containing and eradicating something, but how are we communicating throughout that process? We need to be providing concise, meaningful updates frequently so that people stay aware of those things. Not just because it's in many cases, it's a regulatory requirement, but because, again, that helps to reduce that uncertainty. If you look at healthcare, one of the key things that is central to healthcare is trust. The trust that patients and their families put in the healthcare organization to provide, them with the best care. And when something happens, if we're not able to communicate and appreciate and sympathize with the concern, it puts us at a disadvantage, and it strains that trust that is so vital to maintain that relationship between the patient, the family, and the care provider such as us.
I completely agree. No, definitely, within, any industry, any company, it's not an if, it's a when. When will there be a cybersecurity incident? When will I have to, enact these plans and strategies that you put forth to prevent these attacks, or recover in the event of an attack? And I loved your insight there in regards to the simulations. I honestly don't believe enough companies want to run through those simulations and figure out what is actually happening, and where the communication downfall is, and how to actually really respond in an event like that. I believe if more companies went and did those simulations, they would figure out that there are some gaps in that plan that they wrote up years ago and or months ago.
Yeah, I think that you're hitting on a key point, is that an incident response plan is great on paper, but the dynamics of that change when you encounter the threat, exactly. whatever that threat is. So you have to prepare in a way that's more than just a playbook. It is the situational awareness. It's the ability to make rapid decisions with sometimes minimal information or potentially inaccurate information in a changing landscape that is highly dependent on the technology. And so it's more of an art than it is a science, exactly. But it's something that I think you have to experience, ideally in a practice mode, and consistently be changing that experience so that when and if it actually comes to be, you are well prepared. Maybe not for the exact situation, but you're prepared for how you're going to have to get in that mindset, how you're going to have to work to assess the situation and respond appropriately. So it's hard to look at it in that way, but I think we have to challenge ourselves to look at it less like a check the box and let's create a document, and more of a let's train ourselves to be able to think in this way when something happens, and not just one or two people, but the entirety of the cyber program, IT, and the business as a whole, so that the organization is ready to respond in the event of this thing happening, just like organizations are often ready to respond when hurricanes happen, massive power loss, or supply chain interruptions. They have to be able to respond to, cyber events as well.
Of course, no, it's easy to put down on a piece of paper exactly what should happen, but in the event of something happening, you have to deal with the emotional standpoint, the people that are actually doing the response. How are they emotionally? Are they stressed? Are they, anxious? And those are things that you really nail down in a simulation, so that you can actually get your body and get your mentally prepared for something that could actually happen in the future. So I completely agree with your insights there. Well, Keith, in conclusion here, what are the key takeaways and actual insights you'd like our listeners to have regarding the transition from technical to enterprise risk perspective in cybersecurity?
I would say three things. We've covered them, but earlier. Communication is key. And part of communication to be successful is understanding the organization. Most organizations don't exist for the sake of technology. Technology is an enabler to them. So really understanding what is important to them, what does success look like to the business, will help in those communications to be more impactful. And then I go back to the fact that cybersecurity programs should be either reducing risk or creating value. And I think if you evaluate an initiative or an effort and it can't be classified as meeting one or ideally both of those, then you really have to question, is this the right way to do it? Because you may not see adoption, where you need to be across the business. So those are, I guess, my three things: communicate, understand the business, create value, reduce risk.
Fantastic. No, thank you so much, Keith, for that insight and taking time out of your day to have this conversation with me. And I really hope our listeners get some value. And I definitely know they will get some value out of this conversation. So thank you so much, Keith. And I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, you too. Appreciate the opportunity.
Of course.